Hi everyone, my name's Vigor, and today I'm going to show you how to make a very powerful mage build in Elden Ring. It's pretty well known that magic builds in Elden Ring are kinda ridiculous, but if you don't have a grasp on the fundamentals of what makes them so strong, then you can miss out on a lot of potential power. Today, I'm going to show you the fundamentals of making a very powerful magic build in Elden Ring. First, I'll not only show you the build, but I'll also explain why it works, and I'll give you some tips for adapting it to your needs and playstyle. After that, I'll show you where to find the most important items we use in this build. And finally, we'll do a showcase where I show off the build and its strengths and weaknesses, and I'll discuss the nuances of it in more detail. If you find this video helpful, please leave a like and consider subscribing. It really helps my channel grow. To start off, I'll give you an overview of the build. As we go along, I'll give an explanation of the different choices that I made and why I made them. First, let's look at the stats. You'll notice that this is a level 125 build with plus 25 weapons. 125 is kind of an arbitrary number. I choose it because it's my personal preference for where I like to stop a build. I feel like this is the point where you have enough levels that your build is complete while still being a specific build and not just, you know, your guy can do anything he wants. 125 is also the quote-unquote meta level for PvP. You know, if you're interested in doing invasions or duels or whatever, 125 with max weapons is generally the best place to find activity, you know, of people to actually invade and do multiplayer with. With that said, if you're not concerned about doing multiplayer, or if you're interested in playing multiplayer at a higher level, then by all means, you know, you can keep leveling this build up as much as you want. I'll talk about that a little bit as I explain the stat distribution, but for the sake of this guide, I'm going with a 125 character. But if you want to bring this up to 150, 200, 400, whatever the hell you want to go to, by all means do it. Now, let's talk about the stats themselves. First of all, I have 40 Vigor. 40 Vigor is an absolute must for any build that you make. Doesn't matter if it's a mage, if it's a melee guy, if it's an archer, if it's an assassin, if it's the fucking pizza guy, I don't know. Whatever build you make, you want at least 40 Vigor on, I promise. You know, a lot of people have the philosophy that, oh, well, you know, if I only bring Vigor up to 20, then, you know, that's 20 extra points that I could put into intelligence or whatever, and that'll be more damage that I'm doing. And that's technically true, but the thing is that it doesn't matter how much damage you can do if the bad guy kills you before you kill them, right? So having 40 Vigor puts you at 1,450 hit points. It's a really solid number to be at, and make sure that no enemy in the game is going to one-shot you, at least not on, you know, new game 0. Once you go to, like, new game plus 4 or something like that, then maybe you might start getting one-shotted at 40 Vigor, and you need to level it up and use some more, like, defensive buffs and stuff. But, you know, for most intents and purposes, 40 Vigor is a very solid number to be at, and it's definitely the minimum amount of Vigor you want to have. So I went with 40 Vigor to be able to survive, especially in the end game when you're fighting end game bosses and stuff like that. If you need extra health, or if you're going to raise this build past 125, then I recommend going up to as much as 60 Vigor. There's no point in going past 60 because that's the second soft cap, and you get very little value out of it by bringing it up past 60. But 60 is definitely a very good number to go to if you feel like you need extra health, or if you just have extra points to spare. Up next is Mind. I like to bring it up to 25. Normally I would bring it to about 20, but this is a pretty FP intensive build, so I figured 25 is better. 25 Mind is more than enough, in my opinion, for pretty much any build that you do. If you really feel like you need more FP, then you can bring it up to like 30, or maybe like 35, but I feel like 25 Mind is enough, and then what you do to compensate for not having as big of an FP bar is you just take an extra blue flask or two, and, you know, you have more refills for your FP bar. You know, I don't want to waste too many points on having the blue bar be full more often when we're going to be killing shit so fast anyway that doesn't really matter. For Endurance, I went up to 20. This gives us a solid amount of equip load and stamina. Armor, no matter what your build is, really, armor really just doesn't matter as much as a lot of people think it does in this game. I'm probably going to make a video about it at some point, but essentially, like, you know, if you want to wear the Bull Goat set, which is like some of the strongest armor in the game, you need like 55 endurance just to be able to wear that by itself without fat rolling. And that's not including your weapons and stuff like that. So, you know, you can put 50 points into endurance to wear that armor and have like, you know, 35% damage negation, or you can put an extra 20 points into, say, your Vigor and bring that up to 60 or to 40 or whatever, and like triple your health, right? So you're getting way more value out of Vigor than you are from your armor. Your armor really, I promise, it's pretty much just for fashion in this game. It can help a bit, but it's not something to invest a lot of points into, I promise. And especially on a mage build where we're using light weapons and we're generally trying to stay at a distance from the enemy, you know, armor really just is kind of irrelevant for us. So 20 endurance, make sure that we can wield the weapons that we want and have some nice armor on that looks cool and gives us some bonus without worrying too much about having like super heavy shit on. So now it's on to our damage stats. For strength, I just went with 14. You know, we're not a strength build, so we really don't need that much strength. You could probably bring it down to like 12 and be fine, but I like to keep it at 14 so that we have just a bit more strength for some weapon requirements if you want to use a couple different weapons than from what I show here. But I believe 12 is the minimum that we need in order to be able to wield the Darkmoon Greatsword, which is part of this build. So I just went with 14 just for that little bit of extra, but you can drop it down to 12 if you want. Pretty much the same thing with Dexterity. You can see we require 18. There's a couple weapons like the Nagakiba and a couple others that can benefit from having a bit more dex than that. So I like to go with 20, and it also improves our cast speed a little bit. It's not much, but it is there, and it can help. So especially since the Moonveil, which is the other main weapon in this build, gets a lot of dexterity scaling for its damage, I figured we'll just bring it up to 20 and have that be, you know, a nice round number. Obviously, our main stat for this build is intelligence, so I brought that up to 65 with the points that I had left over from everything else. And you'll see it says our total is 68, and I have a +3 modifier. That's coming from the Crescent Moon crown, or whatever it's called, Rennala's hat. That we're wearing in this build. That gives us +3 intelligence, and that brings us up to 68, which is something that I'll explain in a minute why I chose that specific number and not like 70 or 80. So that concludes it for the stats. For Faith and Arcane, I just left it at the base. Depending on your starting class, you may have more points left over, so you can put those pretty much wherever you want. I recommend sticking them into either Intelligence or Vigor. I think, like, as a prisoner, you probably have something like 12 or so points left over, I think, though I could be wrong about that. But yeah, so, you know, just if you have extra points, or if you're leveling this build up higher than 125, then the stats you definitely want to focus on are Vigor and Intelligence. 60 Vigor and 80 Intelligence are what you should aim for before you put points into anything else if you have extra points left over. Because that's just the soft catch of those stats. Those are the main stats of the build, and so those are what you want to level up. Up next, we're going to talk about our weapons, armor, and talismans. First, let's talk about weapons. So the primary weapon that we're using in this build is going to be Lusat's staff. It's what we're going to be using to cast all our spells. You'll see that I have other staffs equipped in my weapon slots, but those we're just using for the passive buffs that they provide when they're in one of your hands. For example, the Staff of Loss will increase the damage of Night Comet when we cast Night Comet using Lusat's staff, as long as we have the Staff of Loss in our right hand. So I'll talk about that more in a little bit if that's something you don't know about, but that's why we have those other staffs. But the one that we're actually going to cast spells with is Lusat's. I chose Lusat specifically because it's going to give us the highest sorcery scaling with our intelligence stat. It also has the effect of making the spells that you cast with it stronger, but at the cost of 50% more FP consumption. So that FP consumption you're going to see is a little rough, but as long as you keep an eye on your FP bar and just bring a couple extra blue flasks, you'll be fine, trust me. And like I said, if you really need it, you can go up to like 30 mine to compensate for that, but 25 should be enough. Also, I mentioned earlier having specifically at least 67 or 68 intelligence, so I'm not really going to show it in this video, but 67 is the point where the Carian Regal Scepter becomes the best staff besides Lusat's, if you don't want to use Lusat's staff. So below 67, the best staff is the Academy Glintstone staff, but I figure since we're focusing on intelligence anyway, we might as well hit that specific 67 to 68 point threshold, so that if you decide not to use Lusat's staff, you can use the Carian Regal Scepter instead, and have that be the best option for spellcasting. And then it's always good to have a melee weapon, so that, you don't have to use FP to kill stuff if you need to. You'll always want to have a backup that you can rely on, even as a sorcerer. And so I went with the Moonveil because it's very strong, gets very good intelligence scaling. It's going to do a fuckload of magic damage with the intelligence that we have, and also the buffs that we're using. And it's just a solid weapon all around. If you look at this build in the link in the description, then you'll also see that I have the Darkmoon Greatsword, which we can only wield if we two-hand it, so keep that in mind if you use it at this level of strength. We can only wield it if we two-hand it, but, it's the fucking Darkmoon Greatsword. It's strong as shit. It's literally one of the best weapons in the game. So, yeah, they're both very solid weapons. And of course, if you have a different preference, something like Death's Poker, or even like non-somber weapons, if you like something like the Broadsword or any infusible weapon, just give it the magic affinity, and as long as it's a weapon that gets good intelligence scaling, then you're going to do a fuckload of damage with it, because we have a fuckload of intelligence, right? But be careful, because like something like the Meteoric Oreblade, for example, it gets intelligence scaling, but it doesn't get all that much intelligence scaling. That weapon's secretly actually pretty much just a strength weapon. So just because it has intelligence scaling doesn't mean that you want to use it on an intelligence build. So just keep that in mind. Keep an eye on the magic damage that the weapon does, and you'll be fine. And you can add pretty much whatever you want as long as it gets good intelligence scaling. For our talismans, there's a bunch of extra talismans in the inventory of this build, so again, if you want to go look at it in the link in the description, you can see the inventory of talismans and weapons and armor and stuff that we have. There's a few more, so you have some more options to diversify this build a little bit. So for this picture, I decided to go with both the Graven Mass and Graven School talisman. Those both increase the damage that you do with sorceries. The Graven Mass one is 8%, and the Graven School is 4%. So it's a total of plus 12% sorcery damage. And, obviously that's just really good to have. But the Graven Mass talisman is only available in an endgame area, so you might not have access to it. So there's a couple backups inside the inventory if you want to switch to something else inside of that. It's not a huge loss because it's only 8% damage. You can use something like the Radagon icon instead to increase your casting speed. But if you have access to it, the Graven School and Graven Mass talismans are pretty much must-haves for any sorcerer build. After that, we've got the Magic Scorpion Charm. This one also might not be obtainable because there's a certain point. You get it from Ranni's quest, or a side part of Ranni's quest, and there's a certain point where it becomes unobtainable if you missed it. So again, this is one that you can swap out to something like Radagon icon if you want. But if you have it, it increases all magic damage that you do, not just with your spells, but also with things like the Moonveil, like your weapons and stuff like that. All magic damage you do gets increased by 12%, but you also take, I think, 10% more damage while wearing that talisman. Having 40 Vigor helps to make up for that, but again, if you don't have access to the talisman, or if you don't want to take that extra damage risk, then you can swap it out for something else like Radagon icon, maybe Godfrey icon, Shard of Alexander, so those are all good options. And then finally, we've got the Ritual Sword Talisman, which is just a universally good talisman. It increases your damage, it increases all damage that you do by 10% while you're at max health. And so, that helps us at the openings of fights, for that first hit that you're going to get on a boss. Even if you lose health afterwards, that 10% can make a big difference. That 10% extra damage you do with your opening attack can make a big difference. And it's also really good while you're exploring the open world, where you're going to be at full health most of the time anyway. So you're just one-shotting like mooks and shit as you run around and explore. For armor, you can wear anything you want. I just chose an outfit that I think looks cool. I think the Preceptor set alongside Rennala's crown makes you look like a Merlin king wizard type of guy or something like that. I don't know. So I just chose that set because it looks cool. But the only piece of armor that actually matters in this build is Rennala's crown. That increases our intelligence by 3, and so that helps us not only do some extra damage with our spells and stuff, obviously, but it also gives us the break point for the Carian Regal Scepter to be the best non-Lusat's staff in the game, and it also helps us reach the requirement to cast Ranni's Darkmoon, which is just a nice spell to have. So that's why I'm on with that. And you'll also see that I'm wearing the Briar Gauntlets. That just helps because it makes your rolls do a point of damage, and if you're going for stance breaks against enemies, then that makes it easier to maintain their poise damage, because their poise will regenerate after a few seconds if you don't hit them. So having the Briar armor hit them prevents their poise from regenerating, and it can make it easier to get stance breaks. But it's really not a necessary part of the build. If you don't like the way it looks or something, then change it to whatever you want. Just make sure that you are in medium equip load with whatever armor and gear that you have equipped. And now, for the final part of the build guide part of this, we're going to talk about the spells and crystal tiers that I have equipped. I don't actually have a gigantic amount to say about the spells because I'm going to show them instead. But really, these are just high-level spells that do a fuckload of damage and are just good to have. So there's Comet and Night Comet. Those are your bread and butter. Yep, cast that at the bad guy and it shoots a projectile out and the bad guy dies, right? Like, really simple. Night Comet in particular is pretty good because it can be buffed by the Staff of Loss. So if you cast it with Lusat in your left hand and you hold the Staff of Loss in your right hand, then the Staff of Loss will boost Night Comet's damage even more. And so it'll just get an obscene amount of damage, really strong spell, plus enemies don't dodge it because it's quote-unquote invisible. So it's really good to use against bosses and stuff that like to dodge a lot. Honestly, you can probably just get rid of regular Comet if you want and just stick with Night Comet. But I think regular Comet might do more damage. I don't actually know the specifics of it, but personally, overall, I think Night Comet's a better spell, and you're going to see me use it more than Comet in this guide. After that, you see I've got Comet Azur equipped. Personally, I actually don't like Comet Azur at all. I think it's kind of a really bad spell. But, everyone likes to use it, and I'm not going to lie, it is pretty fun to use. So, I included it because why not? We have the stats for it. You're going to see me use it a couple times. In the situations where it's useful, then yeah, like you're going to see in one of the clips that I show about how to actually get all the stuff for these builds, you're going to see I use it, and I think it's actually pretty fucking funny. So, but don't try to rely on it as like a primary spell. It's really situational. So just keep that in mind and you'll be fine using it. After that, I've got Carian Slicer. Carian Slicer, I'm not sure about the specifics, so I don't want to say this with certainty, but I think Carian Slicer is like the highest DPS spell in the game. And for me, it's personally my favorite spell in the game because, you walk up to the bad guy with a fucking lightsaber and just and then they're fucking dead. It's pretty good. It's super strong, costs very little FP, it's fast as fuck. You cannot go wrong with Carian Slicer. And as you'll see, in the third slot on top of the weapons, I have the Carian Glintstone Staff, which boosts the damage of sword sorceries such as Carian Slicer, and the one I have next to it, Adula's Moonblade. So again, you would have the Carian Glintstone Staff in your right hand and Lusat's in your left hand, and you will cast the spell with Lusat's, and that'll give you the most damage for Carian Slicer. And as I just mentioned, I have a Duelist Moonblade. You saw in the intro, it's good for taking out, like, it's good crowd control. It does Frostbite build up, and it's just a solid spell all around. It's got a range projectile that gets some decent range, so I just like it a lot. Being able to inflict Frostbite is always really good, because Frostbite makes the enemy take 20% more damage from all sources for 30 seconds. So, you know, the strategy generally would be hit them with Frostbite and then attack them with your other spells and shit, so you do even more obscene damage against them. Same thing with Ranni's Darkmoon. It's a fairly long-range projectile that does I think it does a magic defense debuff on when it hits the enemy. Like, they get that blue sparkly shit. I think that means that they take more damage from magic specifically. Plus, it also does Frostbite buildup, and I believe the two can stack. And so if you hit them with Frostbite plus Ranni's Darkmoon, then your spells are just gonna melt anything. And finally, we've got Terra Magica equipped. Terra Magica is a buff spell. You cast it, it makes a circle on the ground, and while you're standing inside that circle, all magic damage that you do gets boosted by, I think, 20%. And so that's not just from your spells. Again, that also includes things like the magic damage that Moonveil does, the magic damage that Moonveil's Ash of War does. All magic damage that you do gets boosted by Terra Magica. Very strong spell. That's why I have it. And then finally, while we're here on the bottom, for the crystal tiers in the Wondrous Physic, I've got the Magic Shrouding tier. That one's pretty obvious, pretty self-explanatory. It increases magic damage that you do, and again, that's all magic damage you do, not just your spells, but also your weapons and shit. So Magic Shrouding tier, must have for your Wondrous Physic if you're a mage. And I also have the Intelligence Not Crystal tier. You can swap this out to something like Opaline Hard tier if you want, which will increase your damage negation for 3 minutes. Or something like the Winged Crystal tier if you want to have light rolls, or the Cerulean Hidden tier. That's the one that gives you infinite FP for 15 seconds, so you can cast Comet Azur or whatever. But I went with the Intelligence tier just for that extra numerical boost on what we're doing with the staff itself, because to me that's the most important thing. It might not necessarily be the most optimal thing, I think, but it's definitely, like, it's a noticeable increase to your damage, that extra 10 points of intelligence that it gives you. It brings us up to a total of 78 intelligence, which is just below the soft cap, so it's just really effective to have, and if you have the free slot, then why not? So that concludes just about everything I have to say about the guide part of this build video. Like I said, there's gonna be more that I'm gonna talk about in terms of like nuances and what I think about the build in the showcase section. But if you want to check this build out for yourself and, you know, mess around with it, modify it, check out the stuff that I have in the inventory, then check it out in the link in the description down below. And while you're doing that, while you're down there, leave a like and hit subscribe, and I'm going to switch over to telling you about where to actually get all the stuff for this build now. So now we're on the part of the video where I'm going to show you how to get all of the most important items for this build. There's a few extra things that I have in the build inventory that I'm not going to show in this video for a couple reasons, but these are the most essential ones, and this will get you started on the build. Even in the very early game, you can go and get pretty much all these items with very few bosses killed. So the first item we're going to grab is the Moonveil over in Gale Tunnel in Western Caelid. So you can get here really easily from the Rotview Balcony, which you get to from following the road north in Limgrave. Just go to that road and then follow it all the way over to the east as you saw on the map. Once you get to the Rotview Balcony, you just head straight to the south and you drop down the cliff and you're at the Gale Tunnel. So this is a really short tunnel, and once you enter it, you're not going to be able to leave until you get to the end of it. You don't actually have to kill the boss, you just have to get to the end of it to find the rear exit, because as you can see, there's no elevator here to take you out through the entrance. So you're going to have to be able to run through the dungeon, but it's really easy to run through. There's not that many enemies. You're going to see me do it here in like 10 seconds. You just sprint past everything. It's a very short cave. So all the way at the end of it, you go through the little door, and this takes you to the rear exit site of Grace. There's a little tall tunnel there that you could go out back into Limgrave. So the boss here is the Magma Worm. I actually have a whole video about killing this thing, so I'm not really going to go into detail about it here, but it's really not a hard boss. you can see me here. I'm on New Game +2, so it's, you know, I'm using like endgame spells and shit, but the boss's health and damage are scaled up, you know, in New Game +2. It's not even just New Game +1, it's New Game +2 that you see in all these clips. So it's not like I'm, you know, using like a endgame character to fight like super early game bosses. These things are scaled up to be, you know, strong for my level, and I fucked it up pretty good. But anyway, so kill it, and that's how you get the Moonveil. Very solid katana, and that's what I'm going to use in the majority of the video. Up next, while we're in Caelid, we're going to run to the east and head over to Celia, Town of Sorcery, where we're going to grab Lusat's staff and the Night Comet spell. So on the very west side of town, there's a staircase at the site of grace called Celia Understair. So from that grace, we're going to head up the stairs, and then we're going to head north through the main street in the town. You'll see on your left at the end of the street that there's a sealed magical doorway, and that has the boss in it that we need to kill to get Lusat's staff. So what we're going to do to open that doorway is we're going to go up the stairs onto this platform thing where there's a golden seed, which you should grab while you're here. We're going to jump down to this route, and if we get on top of this building, we can climb up the ladder and light the fire to break the seal. There are 3 of these fires to light in town. This one will open the door for you for this boss. We are going to need to light a second fire, but I'm going to show that in the next clip. But for now, we're going to go fight the boss. So this one I don't have a video about, but they also shouldn't be too hard. It's a Nox Monk and a Nox Swordstress. So you see here, obviously I'm going to use sorceries to kill them, but something like a shield build, if you have like a medium shield with barricade shield on it, most of their attacks should bounce off of the shield. I mean, you know, I'm a high level character fighting them. Even on New Game +2, they're still weak as shit, you know. But yeah, so you can like block their attacks with like a barricade shield, and that'll make them bounce, like you know, they get stunned by it. And by the way, there's Lusat's staff, and that should make killing them not too hard. Anyway, while we're in town, we're going to head to the southwest tower of town. We're going to need to be on the rooftops for this. So you can actually get on the roofs from the staircase that we've gone up that has the golden seed on it. But as you see here, I decided to go through the middle of town. And if you jump in the right spot, then you can fairly easily get on top of the roof over here. And this is right next to the tower, which you see right there to the southwest that I'm heading towards now. This is the tower we need to climb up and light, and this will open a seal in town that has a chest that contains the Night Comet spell. Also, while we're here, there's a third item in town that we're going to grab called the Staff of Loss. So you see the Celia Understair, Site of Grace down there. This is the building that's right next to it when you come up the stairs from it. And if you just jump over to this balcony over here, you can grab the Staff of Loss. So we're not going to cast with that, but if we hold it in our offhand while we cast with our main staff, which in my case is going to be Lusat's, then that will boost the night spells such as Night Comet, which I just picked up from the chest in the middle of town. So on this save, I had already killed Ranni, so I couldn't show you me killing her to get her crown, but I do have a full video about fighting her if you want to check that out. And also, you know, she's the main boss of one of the legacy dungeons in the game. She's a shard bearer. You're going to kill her at some point anyway, so it shouldn't be hard for you to navigate your way to her in the enormous building in the center of Liurnia. So once you have killed her, you can go back to the Round Table Hold and talk to Enya, the Finger Reader. There are 2 things relevant to this build that we want from Enya. So one, if you hit Receive Equipment of Champions, you can get the Queen's Crescent Crown, which is her hat that gives you +3 intelligence. And also, from her remembrance, you can get the Carian Regal Scepter, which, like I said, is going to be the best staff in the game, besides Lusat's at 68 intelligence. Also, since it's a long process, I'm not going to show me getting the Magic Scorpion Charm from Celavis, but I also have a video about Ranni's quest where I show how to get it if you want to go check that out too. Up next, we're going to grab the Comet spell and the Graven School Talisman. This is also found in Raya Lucaria. You don't have to kill any bosses to get to it, which is why I can show it here. From the schoolhouse classroom, Site of Grace, right after the big water wheel elevator thing, you're going to head toward the Red Wolf of Radagon, and on the left side of the hallway, right before the Red Wolf's fog wall, there's an illusory wall you can dispel, which takes you to a secret room that contains the Comet spell, and also behind this altar, there's a stone sword key, so that's nice. Also in this room, you're going to climb up the ladder, and this will take you to another, even more secret area that you can drop down into here. There's a bunch of little jar guys in here. They're going to activate when you grab the talisman, so you probably want to kill them first before you grab it. But on this big pile of crystals, there's the Raven School talisman. Just be careful not to get jumped by the jar guys and get stun locked by them to death. And there's this doorway you can open that takes you back out to the area leading up to the Red Wolf fight. After killing the Red Wolf of Radagon, you'll find yourself in the Debate Parlor, which is the arena where you fight the Red Wolf. This is the one that comes after the Schoolhouse Classroom. If you look back, you can see where we just grabbed the talisman and the spell. But anyway, from here, we're going to run out to the courtyard. After heading through the gate, immediately make a right, and you'll find this hidden ledge that you can jump down to, and a ladder that you can climb up. Then at the top of the ladder, on the right, go through the broken window. There's another item on your left that you can grab here, but it's not relevant to this guide, so I didn't grab it. But if you make a right and come around, you will find a chest that contains the Radagon icon. So we just grabbed the Graven School Talisman, and now that we have the Radagon icon, I want to talk about the Graven Mass Talisman. So I'm not going to show how to get this one because it's in a really late game area. It's in the Consecrated Snowfield, which you get to after going to the mountaintops of the Giants. It's a whole thing. But so you can get the Graven Mass Talisman at Albinauric Rise in the Consecrated Snowfield. And like I said, since it's a pretty late game thing, I want to have an alternative option for you in case you're earlier in the game. And Radagon Icon is a really good choice for that. It increases your spell casting speed, so, it's just good to have. Instead of doing more damage, you'll cast spells faster, and then later on, once you get the Graven Mass Talisman, you can consider using that instead. After that, we're heading up to the Lux Ruins in the Altus Plateau to grab the Ritual Sword Talisman. So you can get to the Lux Ruins by going up to the Grand Lift of Dectus, which is, of course, in the northeast of Liurnia. You take the Grand Lift up, and this brings you to the Altus Plateau. And then there's a set of grace just north of the Grand Lift of Dectus. That was the Altus Plateau grace. And north of that, there is the Lux Ruins. So you see behind me is the Grand Lift of Dectus, and then we just head north up the hill. And that takes us straight up to the Lux Ruins, and so you go through the big building, and then go out the back of it, and right on your left is the cellar that will take you down to where we're going to grab the Ritual Sword Talisman. So we have to kill a demi-human queen in here, and this is that situation I was talking about earlier, where I said that it's kind of funny when you use Comet Azur on an enemy, that you have an opportunity to actually use it on, because you go, hey, fuck you, and then that's it. So, situations like that is where Comet Azur can be pretty fun. I'm not going to lie, but like I said, overall, it's really just not a great spell. But anyway, so go behind her into the room and grab the Ritual Sword Talisman from the chest. There's one more talisman that I want to show as an alternative to swap to in case you need it, and you're going to see why in the showcase. I'll have a little segment talking about this one. But we're heading up to the Black Knife Catacombs in the, I'd say, middle-ish east side of Liurnia. So from the Academy Gate Town, if you head directly northeast, you can get onto the highway, and then just follow the road north and take a right, and that takes you up to the Black Knife Catacombs. This is another fairly short dungeon to run through, so I'm just speeding up the whole thing. In case you don't know about it, these white skeletons will respawn infinitely until you kill the guys that are summoning them, so don't even bother fighting the skeletons, just kill the dudes that are summoning them. But once you get to this room, there's an illusory wall you can break, and that leads you to a secret boss fight, and this is a Black Knife Assassin. They can be a little tough if you don't know how to fight them, but pretty much just be careful not to get grabbed by her, and you should be fine. In my case, I used a Duelist Moonblade because the only status effect that they can be affected by is Frostbite. They're immune to bleed and poison and rot, so I just used a Duelist Moonblade to Frostbite her and fucked her up. They're not too hard once you get a hang of them. But anyway, this one will drop the Assassin's Cerulean Dagger, which is a very nice item to have, as I'll show later. Up next, we're heading over to Southeast Limgrave, where we're going to grab a scroll to get the Carian Slicer spell. So this is, on the southeast corner of the lake. So if you go to the first step, you can just follow the shore of the lake east, and then right next to it, there's a site of grace called Aghill Lake South. Just south of that, on the road, there's a spirit spring that'll bring us up to this little cliff thing, and then there's a ruin that we're going to go and grab the scroll from. So take the spirit spring up on top of the cliff, and then you'll see the ruin right there directly ahead of you. On the ruin, there's a noble sorcerer, and there's the Royal House Scroll. So you need to give this scroll to either Selin at the Waypoint Ruins. I skipped the quick boss fight with the Mad Pumpkinhead. It's, you know, it's the ruins directly north of where we just grabbed the scroll. So you can give it to her, or you can give it to the Turtle Pope at the Church of Vows. Hit give a scroll, and then give the Royal House scroll. And in their merchant inventory, you can now purchase Carian Slicer. So that's where we get Carian Slicer. Speaking of spells, another one that I mentioned was Ranni's Darkmoon. You can only get this after completing Ranni's quest, or at least getting to the very end of it, which takes you up on top of this giant cliff in Liurnia. So you can't get here until you've done Ranni's quest. You come here from underground. So at Shallona's Rise, that's where you can find Ranni's Darkmoon. Again, it's a whole long process, so I don't want to make this video 3 hours long showing how to get it, but I do have a video about Ranni's quest if you want to see how to get up here. Also, on top of the Moonlight Altar at the Cathedral of Manicelis, when you finish Ranni's quest, that's where you get the Darkmoon Greatsword. Again, go check out my video about Ranni's quest if you want to see that process. But what we can get easily and relatively quickly is the Terra Magica spell from the Academy Crystal Cave just underneath Ray of the Caria. So this is on the lake level. It's not actually inside of the Academy. You have to be down at the lake. And then if you head just southeast from the Crystalline Woods, Site of Grace, which you saw me at, then you will run straight to the cave. This requires 2 Stone Sword keys to open, so make sure you have those. This is another pretty short cave, so I'm just going to speed up through the whole thing. The only real threats here are the sorcerers. Well, I guess it's all sorcerers. The only real threat here is the battle mage that you're going to see in this room on the left there. You saw a glimpse of him. But yeah, be careful of him. The boss is a Crystallian duo. I strongly recommend using Moonveil for this, because if you hit them with 3 transient moonlights, and you have to do it, you know, in melee range so the sword actually hits them. But if you hit them with 3 of them, it might be 2 in New Game, actually, because I'm on New Game +2 and they have more poise. But anyway, if you hit them with 3 transient moonlights, it will stance break them, and then they become super easy to kill afterwards. So just do that. You know, just dodge until you have an opening, and then hit them with a transient moonlight, and repeat until you get the stance break. I didn't get it with the projectile there, but I did get it there. And then once you do that, they become super weak to all damage, and also all your hits will stun them, which makes it very easy to kill them. And after that, there's an elevator that we take up. And I probably should cut this, but I'm just realizing now that even with this shit sped up to 4 times speed, it's still long as fuck for no reason, and I think that's kind of funny. But anyway, at the top of the elevator, there is a chest, and inside the chest is the Terra Magica spell. For the final spell that I'm going to show in this video, where you need to go to Primeval Sorcerer Azur in Mount Gelmir. So the way you get here is a little confusing, so I'm actually going to show the whole route. You need to start at the Seethwater River. So from the Lux Ruins, if you go right underneath that, there's the Erdtree Gazing Hill. Go up the little hill that takes you up to the Windham Ruins, and then if you go west past that, that'll take you to the Seethwater River. And then we're going to follow the river northwest up until we get over here to Fort Laive at the Seethwater Terminus. So here's the start of the Seethwater River, just past the Windham Ruins, and you're just going to go through the river. Once you get to this fork here, that I cut, but once you get to this fork here, you're going to make a left, and that'll take you toward Fort Laive, or Lithe, or whatever the fuck it's supposed to be called. There's the Site of Grace for the Seethwater Terminus here, and we need to go across this lava lake where there's a magma worm that's going to spawn, so be careful of that. And we're going to go past the Hermit's Shack, which has a giant bear, which we also need to be careful of. So both of those things are pretty dangerous, so make sure you grab that there, Grace. So just head up towards the fort, and then head south. You're going to come to the giant lake of lava with the magma worm. Just run past that shit. If you do it on Torrent, then Torrent gets hurt, but you'll be fine. And then just keep going. Be careful of the giant bear there. And then you're going to pass by the Hermit Shack, and on your right is going to be the Craftsman's Shack. And then from here, we need to go through the village that has a bunch of demi-humans and sorcerers in it. And when we get to that rock bridge that I just marked, that's where we're going to find Primeval Sorcerer Azur. So just head up the hill. You're going to go past a bunch of demi-humans. There's a couple chiefs and sorcerers here, so be careful. There's also a demi-human queen here, but just behind it on the left, there's the Site of Grace. You can touch it and then rest at it, and that'll make all the enemies lose their aggro. And then you can talk to Azur and Peace talk to him, and he will give you the Comet Azur spell. I was holding my breath for that. Wow, that was longer than I expected it to be, I'm not gonna lie. The final two items we're going to grab are going to be the Intelligence tier and the Magic Shrouding tier for our Wondrous Physic. So for the Intelligence tier, we're going to go up to West Liurnia, so here's where it is from the Academy Gate Town. You go through the King's Realm Ruins, and that takes you to Smithing Master Iji. And then we're not actually going to go up toward the manor. We need to drop down this cliff and go to this little lower area over here, and that's where we're going to find the Intelligence tier. So from the Grace, if you try to jump off this cliff, you're going to die. So you're going to want to head to a slightly lower part of the cliff, and then you can drop down safely. And then just follow the cliff to the north. You'll come to an elevated area that has a bunch of hands on it, so be careful. And in this basin, you'll find the Intelligence not here. It's not here because my character already has it. And then for the Magic Shrouding tier, we're going to go across to the east side of Liurnia, where there's a Minor Erd Tree. So that's the northeast Liurnia Minor Erd Tree. So you can get here from that highway where we went to go to the Black Knife Catacombs earlier. Again, so from the gate town, just head northeast, and then you're going to follow the road up. And this time, instead of making the right and going toward the Black Knife Catacombs, you're just going to go through the Ruined Labyrinth. There's a little loop you got to do, but you go through it, and that takes you up to the Mausoleum Compound. And then from here, you just head northeast, and that takes you over to the Minor Erd Tree. So along the way up to the tree, there's a bunch of these ancestral follower guys. I don't like fighting them because they're just effort to fight, especially if you're fighting them and the tree at the same time. So if you hug this cliff on the east side here and go around behind the tree, then you can avoid aggroing all the ancestral guys, and you can fight just the tree one-on-one. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to speed through killing this thing because it's not all that hard. Here's something to know though. They are weak to frostbite, so hit them with frostbite if you can. Obviously I had Ranni's Darkmoon, but you can use something like Chilling Mist or whatever and fuck them up like that. When it dies, it drops 3 crystal tiers. They will be the Magic Shrouding Crack tier, which is the one that we're here for, increases our magic damage in the Wondrous Physic, and it also drops the Lightning and Holy tiers in case you want those too. Alright, so now we're getting into the showcase guide of this build. I'm going to show this build against a few different bosses and stuff. Right now you're just looking at footage while I fucking ramble. But yeah, so there's a bunch of bosses I tried it out against, and it's really strong because, you know, it's just using really good spells with a really good, pretty optimal stat distribution. It could probably be optimized more, but for what it is, it's pretty fucking good. I would go as far as to say it's pretty much the best, you know, in terms of how you can get magic damage done, you know. So yeah, all these clips were recorded on New Game +2 with a level 125 character using maxed out weapons. And I want to point out that it's on New Game +2 specifically because, like, you see I'm fighting, like, mid-game bosses such as this Godskin Apostle. Normally you would fight this boss around, like, level 60 to 70, I think. You know, so it's not really, like, a max-level boss. But since I'm in New Game +2, its health and damage output have been scaled up by a bunch, as well as its defenses. So it's taking a lot less damage from my attacks. So I'd say it's on pretty fair grounds that I'm fighting it. And you see here that I'm using Carian Slicer with the Physic and the Terra Magica buff, and I am melting this fucking thing. So it does some pretty good damage, you know. So in that clip, I was using Carian Slicer with the Carian Glintstone Staff in my offhand for the buff that it gives to Carian sword spells, such as Slicer and a Duelist Moonblade. In this one, you see I'm using Night Comet, and at first, I kind of bungled it by being out of range. I cast Terra Magica a little too far away, so I'm not even getting the effect of that buff, I think. But it's alright, because I'm getting plenty of fucking damage with Night Comet, especially since I have the Staff of Loss in my offhand, which just increases the damage that I do. You saw there, you know, I ran out of FP here, which is like the one downside that using Lusat's has. But again, if you find the FP consumption too much, then you can switch over to the Carian Regal Scepter that you get from Renala's Remembrance instead, and you'll do less damage, but you'll also use way less FP to cast your spells. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, so it's pretty much just the range of Comet and Night Comet, and the FP consumption that kind of holds this build back a bit, but you have ways of compensating around that, so it's really not even a problem. Here you see me using Comet Azur against Margit, because fuck Margit. I actually ran out of FP, which is one of the things to be expected with Comet Azur, but I still fucked him up pretty good, you know? And then since we're going into phase 2 where he becomes more aggressive, I decided to switch over to Slicer, which is faster and is a melee range spell, and I fucking slaughtered him, as you would expect. This is mostly a boss showcase, but I wanted to get some footage of this build against, like, you know, little normal guys. So you can see they have a whole bunch of health. You know, I'm a new game +2. But, you know, having something like the Darkmoon Greatsword to just hit them with some tap R2s to instantly blast them, you know, at no FP cost, by the way. You charge it up once, and then you have a projectile that you can use as much as you want by just tapping the R2 button. Makes Darkmoon Greatsword a spectacular weapon. If you don't have access to that, then you can get, like I said, Moonveil, or even something like the Wing of Estelle will do really good on this build because it's a high-end build, and that has projectiles too. So, you know, it has a lot of versatility. It's not just a boss melter. It'll melt everything, really. Now, the one problem that the Darkmoon Greatsword does have, and this is probably really just a me issue, a skill issue, but you see I missed a couple projectiles there because of the range and because they got stopped by like environmental objects there. So, you know, that can be slightly problematic, but, you know, just get 5 feet closer to the bad guy and you will be fine. And as you can see, of course, I am just murdering this fucking weird old fuck. Yeah, get out of here. So, you know, Darkmoon Greatsword, pretty solid weapon. You know, I do like it. Look at that AR, 1149 AR. That is quite the bit of AR. Here's some footage of me just using it to, you know, traverse a level and explore. I figured I'd run around and Moonveil a bit. I'm probably going to cut most of this footage out because, you know, it's just me one-shotting everything using this highly optimized build. But something I did want to show is the Assassin Cerulean Dagger, which is really good for sustain, especially if you're playing like multiplayer or something. So what that talisman does is it makes it so that when you get a backstab on an enemy, it restores a bunch of your FP. And there's also the Crimson one that restores a bunch of your health instead. But yeah, so if you can fish for backstabs, like in this place where there's a bunch of guys literally just sitting around waiting to be backstabbed, or, you know, if you're fighting like knights and shit, you like roll behind them and get a backstab, or you get a stance break and do a crit, you know, you get a bunch of FP back while you have that talisman on. So it's not one that I would keep on at all times, but it is one that I would swap to in the event that my FP is getting low and I don't want to use a flask because I'm in like a low risk area, for example. And again, it's especially good if you're doing multiplayer, where, you know, as a cooperator, your flasks are cut in half, and also there's the Regal Ancestor's Horn, or whatever the fuck it's called, that gives you FP when you kill an enemy instead. But yeah, so it's really good for your sustain in co-op and stuff if you want to be able to have more FP with a lower number of flasks. In this clip, I want to show off the kind of damage potential that Moonveil could get if you have Shard of Alexander on, as you saw at the very start of the clip. So here's me absolutely murking this Erdtree avatar using Moonveil, and I totally didn't expect, I totally knew that I wouldn't get hit there during that animation that it did when I did a Transient Moonlight, so yeah. And here, I tried to use Moonveil to get some collaterals, but I failed. But I will fight Goldfree. So here's me fighting Goldfree, and in this one I really show off how, you know, how fast Carian Slicer is, and how good it is that you have, you know, just such a fast, ridiculously strong spell. Because, you know, Godfrey is a pretty high intensity fight, you know, so you have pretty limited punish windows, and you have to learn to attack during the small punish windows in between his swings and stuff, and Carian Slicer just excels at that. It would be even better if I had Radagon icon on, but I believe in this one I have the Graven Mass and Graven School Talismans on. Or I had Shard of Alexander, so I wasn't even benefiting from that. In this clip, it's a Black Knife Assassin, and I figured, why not? I'd fuck her up with a Duelist Moonblade again. And as you can see, when you're hitting both the projectile and the actual magic sword part of the spell, it does some pretty intense damage. So in this clip, I wanted to switch over to the Carian Regal Scepter and show off how strong that is. So you're going to see me using it here, but I'm also using Lusats in my offhand for some reason. I don't know why I didn't switch that. And I think that partially contributes to why I'm going to get owned a little bit here. But you see, I open up the fight with Ranni's Darkmoon, the intent being that it gives him the magic debuff, and it also should have frostbited him, or I wanted it to frostbite him, I should say, but I don't think it did. But yeah, then I switch over to the spells and try to use like Night Comet, and it's like, oh, I suck at fighting Morgott, and I don't know how to fight him because I've never bothered to actually practice fighting him. But you know, even then, having the range of spells like Night Comet, for example, is just really good. I panicked a little bit there, and I had run out of FP. I would have liked to hit him with another Darkmoon, but you know, I didn't need to. I just filled up my health, so I had the full Ritual Sword buff, and then I did Terra Magica, and I fucked him up. Here I was on my way to the Forbidden Zone after killing Morgott, and I remember there's a Crucible Knight that just stands here with its back turned toward you, so I said, yeah, that's a good opportunity to use Comet Azur. And so I used Comet Azur. And it didn't fucking die, because I had just not quite enough damage, and you can see here I was kind of irked by that. And then in the Forbidden Zone, there's a Blackblade Kindred here, and these guys are notoriously, I wouldn't say like weak to magic, but like magic is just really effective against them compared to most other damage types, so I figured it was a good opportunity to show off magic. And I also hate these guys. They're kind of a really tough fight, and I don't know, I have really mixed feelings about them. But anyway, you can see I am fucking him up with these spells. He's also fucking me up, but still. And he's a bit more of an endgame boss, so, you know, the damage is a bit more appropriate. Or, you know, it's more of an appropriate enemy for, like, a comparison of this max level build, even though I'm on New Game Plus 2, and so all the enemies are scaled up. But yeah, you can see I'm fucking him up. And I accidentally did a hit with my staff there, and so I was like, yeah, I'm going to kill him with the staff. And then I did 10 damage, and I was like, I'm not going to kill him with the staff. And so I just switched over to Night Comet and tried to kill him. And then I started to panic here a little bit, because we're both one hit, and I was like, oh, fuck. But I managed to come out on top. So that was a nice little fight. You see in this one I was using Radagon icons, so my spells were a bit faster. And then, of course, what better boss to end with than the Fire Giant and his ridiculously huge health pool. He didn't want to cooperate with me, so I wanted to try to get him to come toward my Terra Magica, but he didn't want to, so I lost a little bit of damage there because I was standing outside of the Terra Magica, but, you know, I still one-shotted his fucking cast on his leg, so, you know, that's cool. It's doing pretty good damage, you know? You just really can't go wrong with it. Yeah, the only problem is I just keep running out of FP, because Lusat just makes it cost so much FP, so again, if that's a problem for you, consider using the Carian Regal Scepter instead, because that extra 50% FP consumption is just kinda brutal. But at the same time, you also get a whole bunch of extra damage from your spells. And here, I decided to take the opportunity to hit him in the head with the Duel's Moonblade a couple times. I didn't get the Frostbite on him, but I did some pretty good damage, you know? So it was pretty good. And then, as I was nearing the end of the fight, I had an idea, and I was like, ooh, I still have 10 million runes left over, because this is my mule save character, so I have a fuckload of runes, so I can get to pretty much whatever level I want. And so I was like, ooh, I have 10 million runes left over. Let me quit out and go try this guy with the maximum, you know, level that I can get to with my current runes. And so that's what I did. So I brought Intelligence up to the 80 soft cap, and then I did Vigor, and then I just did a bunch of Dex for casting speed and to make the Moonveil stronger. So yeah. And with the Wondrous Physic, I'm going to go up to 90 Intelligence, and plus the hat equals 93 Intelligence. So I'm going to be doing some pretty nasty damage here, as you're going to see in a second. So I had the same damn thing happen again, where he didn't want to come toward my Terra Magica, and then I ran toward him, and he was like, oh, I'm going to roll on you. And I was like, oh, well, you're still not, you're my fucking Terra Magica. But as you can see, I'm doing like, what is that, 3,200 damage per hit or something like that. So that's pretty good, you know? Ooh, that one was 35.99 or something like that. Yeah. You're going to see I aim for his chest for a couple shots here, because I was like, oh, well, you know, his chest is probably also a weak point, right? But no, it's not. It does way less damage. Go for his foot, or, you know, always go for his left ankle, because that's his weak spot. But yeah, you know, I'm just fucking him up. Definitely planned that there so I didn't get hit by the plate. You know, and then I said, ooh, this time I'm going to cast Terra Magica before I do any attacks. And then I tried Carian Slicer, and I missed. But I still got good damage off. So yeah, as you can see, that was some pretty substantial damage. If you know you want proof that I'm on New Game Plus 2 for these clips or something, you can look at the amount of runes that the bosses dropped when I killed them, and you can see, you can compare that to how many runes they are worth in New Game Plus 2. Closing notes, not much really. You know, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you enjoyed the video. You know, please leave a like and subscribe if you found this helpful and you want to see more of my content. Down in the description, there will be additional notes with some, you know, more notes and suggestions and links and stuff if you want to check that stuff out. I'll also write down the leveling guide for, like, as you continue to level up. But essentially, you know, as you go past 125, the things you need to level up are Vigor to 60 and Intelligence to 80, and then after that you can do pretty much whatever you want, and it doesn't really matter because the two main things of this build have been fully satisfied at their soft caps. But anyway, you know, I hope you found this video enjoyable and or helpful. My name is Diabedor, and I will catch you later.